This is the Mental Race podcast. Together with my guests, I will be discussing what human energy and mental performance is all about. I am Heikki Huovinen. Welcome to the show. Keegan Knittle, welcome to the Mental Race podcast.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Let's start from the question I always ask from people, because I'm really interested that, what individually give energy to people. So it would be nice to hear from you that what gives you energy.
What gives me energy is staying active, playing sports, spending good time with friends, and more recently, spending a lot of time with family and with a small daughter. She has enough energy for multiple people, so it's good to spend time with her and absorb some of that. Definitely on the slower days, get a toddler around the house, and you'll have plenty of energy, or you'll have to.
Yeah, indeed. And this is actually, I think this is the reason why we met in the first place, because I was substituting you in the sport and exercise psychology course in one class. You wanted to substitute, and I was there teaching when you
That's
were
right.
having parental leave. So yeah. Okay, cool. So you like to do sports, and then you have that family there, which kind of give you energy and do you feel it gives you another perspective as well and helps you also in your work, or how do you feel with the parenthood?
It definitely gives another perspective, and it, at least so far, does not help in in the work life. Finding extra time with
Yeah,
short daycare days with such a young one, as it's always a bit of a challenge. It's been a real adjustment,
yeah.
but making do and enjoying every minute of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great to see the little buggers do their thing and grow and not minding anything else besides their needs.
That's right.
Yeah,
We were
yeah.
last night. We had a Christmas concert in the middle of the night at around 4:30. It was time to sing
Yeah.
Soihdut sammut, kaikki väki nukkuu. She was serenading us at four
Nice,
o'clock. It
nice.
was
And she is your wife actually Finnish or
Yes, she is.
ah,
Yeah.
okay, so she's native Finnish speaker then on that
Mm.
front as well. Yeah, okay, nice. That's a Finnish Christmas song, by the way, for the English listeners.
Great one.
Okay,
Great one.
yeah, it's a good one. Yes. Okay, let's go to the topic, which is New Year's resolutions, and it's a infamous thing that we tend to make these New Year's resolutions, and a lot of them don't then stick. And I was wondering that what you have found to be key reasons why the New Year's resolutions actually fail.
Well, there's a number of possibilities for this. Pretty much every year since I've had some sort of academic esteem, I get some sort of reporter or somebody calling to ask me about exactly this question.
Yep.
Um, and it's my answer is usually the same, but you've asked it in a different way. People usually ask, "What makes it work? What tips can you
Hmm.
give to people to
Yep.
make it work?" And I can give you those. But as to what doesn't work, I think probably the biggest factor is habits. So
Mm.
what we have always done in certain situations, be it, in the evenings, we're on the couch playing games or watching TV or reading. Um, those things we've been in that situation and repeated that same behavior and been in that situation and repeated that same behavior so many times that it becomes really entrenched. And
Mm.
getting over the hump, so to speak, is tough. It's tough. It takes a lot of repetition. And it takes a lot of willpower, to get started, to be in that situation where you have something else that you would normally do to force yourself to do the new thing. And if you've been able to repeat that new behavior a number of times and experience some sort of success and feelings of competence and just success mainly, and some positive feelings come out of it on a number of occasions, then it's more likely to be maintained. Uh, but that old
Mm.
habit is still there,
Mm.
and it takes a long time to build habits, and it takes equally long for old habits to break down, at least in most cases.
That's
And
interesting.
there's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
whole neurobiological explanation I could go into, but I think I'll refrain as it's not fully my area of expertise.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so they are really ingrained these habits, and it's easier to resort back to those old habits than kind of use your willpower to create the new ones. So there's always
Mhm,
this friction between the old habits and the new habits.
definitely.
Yeah.
And staying focused and keeping your attention focused on that new behavior is really important, because
Mm.
when you're able to focus your attention on it, then your attention goes away from what you would have done in the past in those situations. So
Mm.
that's key. It's in those moments when we're not paying attention that we're likely to slip back into the patterns of behavior that we've know and love so well.
Mm. Let's go there soon, but before that, I would like to hear about those habits. And you said that it takes long time to, let's say, get out of the old habits. So how long does it take to get out of the old habits, actually?
It depends.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I will go a little bit into this neurobiology aspect of it. Um, so each action that we take has some sort of a reward attached to it, some sort of a value attached to it, be it a high value, something we really appreciate or expect good things out of, or a low value that we expect only negative things out of. And basically, in any given situation, there's a limited number of behavioral responses you might take. And usually one of those behavioral responses predominates. And often that dominant behavior has a very high value to it. So, in order for the new behavior to become the dominant behavior, it needs to achieve a value equal than or higher than the old behavior. And that can be done in a number of
Mm.
ways by accumulating a bunch of small rewards linked to that behavior, or by having some really powerful, really strongly emotionally connected positive outcome of that behavior. Or to a lesser extent, focusing on what that behavior is going to give you in the longer terms, what outcomes it can help you to achieve. And the more intense those positive values become in relation to the new behavior, the more likely and the quicker the old habit will break, so to speak. But as to how long it takes, it depends on the individual, depends on the situations, depends on the reward structures they place in there. And when I say rewards, I don't mean money or,
Mm.
you know, take yourself to the spa for a day. I mean neurochemical rewards that we
Yeah.
have going on in our brains.
Yeah. So you're speaking about dopamine and these things.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the new action needs to bring a greater reward than the old action, and then the new action will prevail in the long term.
Yeah. Needs to have
Okay.
greater value.
Greater value. Yeah. And what's the role of like deliberate contemplation of the value of the action in this sense of reward in the end?
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that we don't this comes back to what I said about action control, that when we're able to force ourselves to do the behavior with a lower value. We're able to do that just through self-control, through staying focused, and through a strong intention to want to do that new behavior. Um, but that's not an infinite resource, this self-control. It can
Mm.
take time, and we can't constantly force ourselves to do things. So it takes time for it to build up and for self control to become less of the equation.
Mm. Okay, okay. And because this is very interesting for me that, the reward of the action is highly subjective, and like, what do you believe in your mind the body also kind of follows. And I'm really wondering that, is the reward mechanisms in the brain, physiologically speaking, also following your belief of the reward, of the magnitude of the reward. So if you really believe that something is going to be good for you, something is going to, yeah, be valuable for you, then that's going to actually motivate you more. Because there's some evidence I read, I'm not completely sure about that, but there's there's a sense in my brain, or in my mind, that this is the case. But what do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I would say the evidence definitely points in that direction. That and that's evident from research on things like self-talk and sort of
Mm,
imagining yourself being successful in situations that you can, in a way, talk yourself into being able to do it. And the same goes with rewards, that you can talk yourself into the value of those rewards. And yeah, self-perception theory is one theory that comes to mind that specified this or suggested this already 50 years ago. That
mm.
the we tend to act in accordance with the things that we think or witness ourselves doing, and think about the way we're doing things based on our behavior. So infer
Yeah.
what we're believing based on how we've acted in a given situation.
Yeah, yeah, I see. And if talking about, like, really specifically about the rewards, in my mind, like, if I'm thinking about myself, one big reward is self-esteem. If I can do something which promotes my self-esteem, or also like self-image or identity, if you will, and let's say, like, going to the gym, and when I manage to do strength training, that's somehow building my self-esteem, self-image, identity, because I kind of think that I'm this guy who likes to strength train. I've always gone to the gym, and I like the smell of the iron, and just I done it so long time, like, and it's somehow part of me. And like, this is very fascinating for me, because there was a time in my life when I was demotivated for strength training. And the reason was
Mhm.
that my perceived reward was not there, because what I thought was a reward was that I could do the same that those fit guys who are at the moment at the gym. Because I was detrained. I was traveling a lot at certain point of my career. I was focusing on coaching and not so much my well-being and my things, and I was detrained. And I tried to go to the gym, but I was kind of comparing myself to others and what they are doing, and this guy is doing the 200 kilo squat, and I used to do that also. I cannot do it now. And so
Mhm.
there's no reward for me, because I'm kind of, I just can do with the 140 kilos or whatever, the squat, and it's not enough. And there's kind of no sense of reward in this sense for me. I'm not being
Yeah.
able to do that person, do that thing what I want to do, and I cannot be the person I want to be. And and later on, actually, and this was one of the epiphanies for me, when I was doing the sports psychology course myself. I was thinking about this for myself, and discussed with my peers at the time, and kind of found my new way to strength training, that, hey, what are the rewards really, what are the reasons really. And I noticed a big shift in my motivation as well.
Mm.
And I don't know, what do you think of this one, like like really stopping to reflect yourself, that what's the reward for me.
Yeah, this is a huge thing when it comes to getting people who are not, physically active. And a big
Yeah.
part of that is that they don't view physical activity as who they are. It's not congruent
Mm,
with their identity. And when they picture themselves being physically active, these feelings of incompetence and of,
mm,
not being as good as other people come to the forefront. And those are very strong emotions and can really be demotivating, even for an experienced exerciser as yourself. So imagine somebody who doesn't have that, years of experience and positive experiences with physical activity uh, to help them out. That it's the hurdle is really high. So
Mm.
in some current research we're doing with our research group in Jyväskylä, we are delivering a physical activity intervention to inactive parents who have inactive children. And one of our sessions focuses on not worrying about what other people are doing and things that you can't do, but focusing on what
Mm.
you can do
Yeah.
and trying to create an identity for yourself that is focused on what you can do. So
Mm.
I can have a good time riding bikes with my kids. I can have a good time walking around. I can feel comfortable in my own skin when I do the activities that are easy for me. These sort of things are crucial, and that identity aspect is pretty much the platform uh, from which you can build a maintained pattern of physical activity behavior in novice exercisers.
So over time, when you reinforce this kind of self-talk that which is based on what you can do,
Mhm.
you start to create an identity of this person who can do certain type of activities, and it starts to build and build and build that, hey, I'm actually an exerciser. And this is interesting for me, these words, that there's two words which many times seem to mean the same thing, which is exercise and there's sport. And this was interesting. The first day when I went to university in my first degree in exercise physiology, the dean of the faculty, he insisted to us young students that, remember this, there's two different things, sport and exercise. And I didn't understand what he meant, because but well, they're the same, you know. But like you speaking about that, how you can reframe for yourself that, you know, what kind of an exerciser are you, and if you would use the term sport person, you know, that's completely different connotation. Sport is exercise which is geared towards competition, and it's not for
Mhm.
everybody, competition. So what's your thoughts on that, and the power of the words and which words you use when you build
Well,
this exerciser identity and then strengthen your reward for that exercise?
yeah. Uh, well, just to back up about the whole sport versus exercise thing, I find it very interesting. So, my background is in health psychology,
Yeah.
which focuses a lot on behavioral change, all types of health behaviors, not just physical activity. But most of my research has been in physical activity promotion. And uh, when I took this new position in Jyväskylä for assistant professor of exercise psychology, that was the first I'd really ever heard the term exercise psychology, and didn't really
Mm.
know about this whole field of sport and exercise psychology, and that this whole physical activity domain was under that exercise umbrella. But physical activity encompasses both sport and exercise.
Yep.
Exercise is just one type of physical activity, and physical activity is anything we do that, you know, leads us to burn calories or move any skeletal muscle
Mm.
movement. Um, but especially health enhancing physical activity is what's important, and that can be different for different people. Person who does nothing, doing something, anything is a step in the right direction. Or somebody who's already quite active, only going to get marginal gains from increases in physical activity at large. So then it might be useful to gain more fitness, for example, to focus on specific aspects of strength training or something like that. So the starting point for different people dictates what types of physical activity are best for them.
Mm.
Um, but definitely my expertise is in the exercise psychology field, and in getting average persons to start doing some physical activity, and less so on what would keep a sports person motivated in the longer terms. I can tell you that the factors that motivate them behind the scenes are probably quite similar, uh, but yeah, the exact methods are quite different for changing physical activity behaviors versus enhancing performance.
Mm. I see. I see. Okay. And this um, impact of this identity and identity, let's identity as a reward for
Yeah.
behavior, has been really fascinating for me long time already. And and I came across with a really good article on this topic on successful weight loss maintainers. And this was an article by Spreckley and colleagues 2020. And they had, I think it was like 15 articles that they reviewed, and they studied, well, people who were successful in maintaining achieved weight loss. And this was big part. They named it encouraging experiences, and the encouraging experiences were exactly tied to identity, but not actually like what their identity used to be, but new identities. And there's a couple
Yeah.
things here, like they described having found a new sense of purpose by channeling their energy into educating themselves and like-minded peers in various areas, including dieting and exercise, to help them attain what they had achieved. So there was like their identity
Mm.
was reinforced by a new group of people, or the
Yeah.
same group, but they got encouraged by this new identity. They spoke of having developed new identities, transforming into people who lived healthy lives, took chances, pursued previously daunting opportunities, and felt they had existentially changed indefinitely. So, this goes on. Participants spoke of having reinvented themselves by fundamentally shifting their identity, speaking of a second chance at life as this reinvented version of themselves. And when I'm having practical coaching, and some clients also struggle with things like weight, and they are in the obesity area, and it's causing health challenges and different challenges, and there's so many times like fear in the way, and self-doubt and self-criticism, and sometimes they don't even dare to think about this new identity there. But what do you think about how can you actually do this? Okay, you said that you can start, one intervention you did, that you can start to focus on things that you can do and slowly build the identity. Is there something else you can do on this identity note, which we haven't discussed yet?
Well, one that you mentioned in reading that blurb from that article there is sort of identifying as a role model, showing that
Yeah.
you have an important influence on what other people are doing, other people around you. So that is a good way to build identity, at least in the need
Mm,
to set a positive example. But that's sort of an external type of motivator in a way, that uh, your what you owe to other people is in a way driving you. So that's not perhaps the best way, but just asking people to think about it is one. The simplest way. Talk about it. What are your thoughts about
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
your identity and physical activity? And you can also fall back on some basic techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy to get people to, okay, explain how they're viewing themselves in light of physical activity at the moment, finding things that are probably not true or not in line with evidence, and setting up some behavioral experiments for them to test these self statements.
Mm,
And by setting up good behavioral experiments, you can help people to change their cognitions about what they're capable of behaviorally. And in that, the new identity is likely to form. The old
mm.
cognitions will be disproved or let down a little bit by these behavioral experiments, and can build up a new identity based on evidence.
Yeah, and that blurb which I just kind of set there, I think it's somehow echoes for me courage. So people have taken a courageous step when they are unsure, they are scared, and they have some beliefs about themselves. Can they do that? And then when they could do that, they feel very good about themselves. And you said that if you can kind of use that experience and become even a role model for others, then that's one great thing to even more
Sure.
reinforce that
Yeah, just
identity.
as
Yeah.
they one thing that we've been taught in our most recent university pedagogy studies that I completed this fall is that one of the best ways to get people to learn something is to have them teach it. So
Mm,
having someone who's just gone through a behavior change process, getting them to lead someone else, some sort of peer mentoring, those are pretty successful interventions usually. Also for the fact that the people who the original person ends up guiding, they see the person in front of them as a peer and not as a doctor or someone who's telling them what to do from a distance or from some lofty position, that they're really on the same level.
Yeah, that's great. And that's where social media can be really powerful and positive. You can share your experience and reinforce your identity and help others to join the ship.
And really negative. It's a double-edged
Yeah.
sword,
Yep.
certainly, and that's one thing that some of the participants in our current intervention have expressed, that when they see social media posts of people who are much more fit or much more capable of them, they see themselves as not fit and not capable, and that might discourage them from doing anything related to physical activity. So that's why it's important for them to find their own role models or own things that they can do, that they are capable of. So definitely it can be inspiring and it can be daunting, both, depending on the individual viewing the message, certainly.
Yeah. You are an expert on motivational interviewing, and there's this term discrepancy, and one of the goals in motivational interviewing. So motivational interviewing is a communication style to increase motivation towards a wanted behavior in an individual. Very autonomy supportive, very respectful, and this discrepancy is one goals that you try to help to create a discrepancy, not too big. And like you said there, that social media, you have an example of a person who's like way out of your goals which you could achieve, and they perhaps they don't have kids and they don't even work, and they are focusing like full time on something, and
Yeah.
you don't realize it when you look at social media. Wow, this guy is like advancing so much in their strength training. Or equally, if weight reduction is your goal, oh, how is this possible, this guy's doing this and that?
Mm.
You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You have 3
Yeah,
kids
yeah.
and stressful job and money issues and all that. So it's such a complex thing. So sometimes it's hard when you see somebody and it's a too big discrepancy, so it feels unachievable for you, and then that can be
Mhm.
demotivating. So what do you think about this discrepancy anyways?
Yeah, so the discrepancy in motivational interviewing that you're trying to develop
Yeah.
in your conversation with an individual is basically the discrepancy between where they are and where they would like to be.
Yeah.
So it's a basic self-regulatory technique. So you explore the person's values and what they're trying to achieve in life, and ask them where they are in relation to those now, and what steps they're taking to move toward those things, or what steps they could take to move toward those things. And then, yeah, on the one hand, you say you want to be here, but you're here now. Can you
Mm.
explain that to me? What is the role here? How are you going to get there? And you can work through it in that way. Um, Anytime you can highlight what in motivational interviewing also is a concept of ambivalence, and that's sort of feeling two ways about the same thing,
Mm.
recognizing both the positives of a change and the positives of keeping things the way they are, and trying to develop a discrepancy between those two things is also really important to do, bringing all of those things out onto the table. um, yeah, I
Mm.
guess that answers your question. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, and okay, we started with the whole reward thing and how okay, the old behaviors are many times in the way of building the new behaviors or habits, and if you look at like what you said, that okay, the reward of the new behavior needs to be bigger than the reward of the old behavior. And it's interesting how we know something about the brain science and dopamine and these things nowadays, but like motivational interviewing, this is exactly the kind of style that is helping the person to contemplate on the reward. So that
Yeah.
discrepancy, that what's the reward if I start to go forwards, and equally kind of
Hmm.
acknowledging the fact that there are reasons why I'm doing the present behavior. So
Absolutely.
there's this,
Yeah.
like you said, the ambivalence, and there's the change talk and sustain talk, but like perhaps you could speak a bit more about motivational interviewing in this self-talk context, that is it actually a useful way of then speaking to ourselves, also with regards to what we just discussed about building the new identity?
Um, so is self-talk a good way to build a
Yeah,
self-identity? Is this the
and
question?
basically this motivational interviewing style, kind of talking with yourself.
Yeah, uh, we published a couple of years ago this list of behavior change techniques called the self-enactable techniques uh, compendium, and
Yep.
in it we took and basically what that is a list of techniques that people can do themselves to help change motivation or behavior. Not that you would deliver to somebody, but things that I can do for myself to change motivation or behavior. And a few of those we took directly from, oh, sorry,
It's all
a
right.
few of those we took directly from motivational interviewing. And
Mm,
a few of them are like asking yourself about what you want, asking about desire, asking about what you can do, your ability, asking about your reasons for wanting to change, ask about your need for wanting to change. So just exploring the need to change, desirability, reasons, and need to change, these four types of
mm,
change talk that you mentioned earlier. So you can think about these things on your own. As to whether they're effective, I don't know about that. I don't think there is any evidence necessarily on that, but
mm,
certainly there is evidence for self-talk interventions and their effects on behavior. I'm not aware of the evidence on changes in identity, though.
mm,
But I would say that there's potential there for sure, that you can,
okay.
through having an open conversation with yourself and
Yeah.
who thinking about who you are, that your identity could strengthen. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a nice acronym. This DARN, DARN, desire, ability, reasons, needs. So you can give it a go on any behavior change, and we don't know exactly that if there's direct cause and effect relationship, but some plausible mechanisms at least behind that.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, so let's discuss about what really works. And what is interesting for me in your research is that you've been doing this within person research actually, and not just focusing on uh, let's take a group and measure pre and post, do some intervention in between, but like, and not just look at the group thing, but study one individual over the course of a long time, and then study another one and another one, and kind of take results out of that one. So perhaps we start from this. If you could describe more, what kind of research is this within person
Well, I
behavior
can
change
do this.
research?
I
Yeah.
can do that, but I'd like to go back and answer the other half of your question that you asked me about the New Year's resolutions first,
Yes.
because you asked me what is it that makes somebody fail, but I
Yeah.
have some ideas about what might help somebody succeed too, if you'd like
Yeah.
to hear
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Of course. Yes.
the
Yes. Yes.
most
Yes.
most of the, I know you have places you want to go in this, but I've got
Yeah.
places I want to go too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And that's fair.
the the best thing in the technique that I always give to people is to track what it is you're doing, self
Yeah.
monitor your behavior.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, there are several reasons. One, I mentioned before the importance of attention and paying attention to the new
Mm,
behavior. And when you have to write down what you've done in relation to this new behavior on a daily basis or on a couple times a day, however often you want to write it down, it makes you think about it. Oh, I haven't written anything down yet today. I need to do something so that I have something to write down. That's the first benefit. It focuses attention and gets the focus on the behavior in question. The second thing that it does is it helps you to identify where you are when you're trying to get to a certain level. Maybe you can get there eventually, but as you said earlier, if that discrepancy between where you are now and where you want to be is huge, it
mm,
can be daunting. So if you know that you're here and you're wanting to get here, you need to get here at some point first,
yeah.
and then maybe here and here and here and here. So knowing where you are knows or lets you know how big of a next step you're able to set.
Mm.
Super important.
Yeah. So and when you say tracking behavior, you mean actual actions and not so much of the outcomes of the actions. So like.
Now, this is another thing. So in addition to tracking the behavior itself, and this is where I was headed next, you can track how you feel about after
Mm,
you've done that behavior. What was going on? You can track not only how, and then if you track that over time, you can see, okay, I was doing this on this day, and afterward I felt good. I did it the next day and I felt very good. And you can see, okay, if I do this, then I feel good. And then you can also track how you're feeling when you do that old behavior. How is that making you feel? Good, less good, great. And when you have that data, you can compare, okay, it seems actually that when I'm doing this new behavior, things are a little bit better.
mm,
Uh, it could also go the other way, but still, at least you then have some knowledge to go on. And you can also track sort of when you end up being physically active or when you end up doing this new behavior and in what contexts you end up doing the new behavior. So that can be a guide as to when you might be able to fit more of that wanted behavior in.
mm,
So self-monitoring is the key. And if you do one thing to help yourself do some self-monitoring, and if you are focused on physical activity and you're wearing a smartwatch or something, it's there, but make sure you pay attention to it and really check in with it on a regular basis. Because if it's just tracking your behavior and you don't pay any attention to it, then that first benefit that I mentioned sort of goes out the window. So
mm.
writing something down is probably the best way to really focus the attention on it.
Okay, nice, nice. So kind of, yeah. So the real value in self monitoring is that you focus your attention on the wanted behaviors, right?
Yeah, and it keeps you grounded and keeps you realistic in where you're going to go next.
Nice, nice. Okay, and again in this article by Spreckley and colleagues, which I mentioned, 2020, that actually the first finding was exactly this continuous monitoring. That
Mm,
was one of the explaining factors and differentiating factors on those who managed to maintain the lost weight. Um, so yeah, seems to be very important thing, and sometimes I still feel with the wearables especially that they can, if you look at short-term data, let's say it's just one night how you slept, for instance sleep, like how you slept, that can be sometimes more harmful than beneficial. And I'm thinking myself, like coaching wise, that trends are more important than like 1 or 2 days, because yeah, if the Aura ring or some device is telling I slept badly, then you create a belief I slept badly and therefore I will be nowhere today, and that belief itself can be actually more harmful than you sleeping a bit worse than what you slept the night before. Or
yeah.
what do you think about this kind of, let's say, self-monitoring, and what's the frequency you actually look at data and how do you interpret the data?
Yeah. Um, for sleep, it's a very complicated thing. Of course, sleep is a behavior, but there are some aspects of sleep that we cannot consciously self-regulate, or there are many aspects that
Yeah.
we cannot consciously self-regulate. We can put our physiological states in an optimal way to get the most restful sleep, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that sleep is going to be restful. So for
Yeah.
sleep, and beyond that, there are also some um, better and worse ways to measure sleep. Obviously, in a lab, you're going to get much better readouts of what's actually going on than just wearing a ring. Um, so, in any case, with sleep data, and that's not my area of expertise, but
Mm.
just be a little bit. It's a behavior, but it's not one that you can really target the smaller details within. For physical activity, I don't think that it necessarily presents too many issues. The
Mm.
only issue is if
Okay.
you see yourself going in the wrong direction, or you find through self monitoring that actually this new behavior, physical activity, is not good for me, is leading to bad outcomes,
Mm,
then it does take some other corrective actions to, okay, maybe I need to try a different mode of physical activity or a different intensity or at a different time of day to get more of these outcomes that I'm after. Um, so it's still useful as a tool to guide further corrective action toward changing the behavior, but it might not have positive effects immediately in the short term.
mm, yeah. What's your advice on people who really struggle to form a positive emotional connection with the new behavior? Let's speak about the exercise, physical activity.
Mhm.
So, and you mentioned there that there are lots of people who never have had like a positive emotional connection with physical activity. So you said there that it's actually important to also monitor your feelings, how you felt, this felt good, this felt bad. So and you could kind of monitor yourself in this way that, okay, I did exercise, it felt like shit, next day it felt feels same, the next day perhaps a
Even
little bit better,
worse.
but yeah, or even worse. So like what, how could you encourage these people that um you know, can they expect that at some point the emotional connection will also change, or like how do you get going if you actually, okay, you consciously or cognitively understand that I really need to be active, I want to be active, I have all the reasons, but it just feels so bad. So how do you go over that?
There is no guarantee that somebody will find a given form of physical activity enjoyable or have positive reactions to it. And
Yeah.
it takes sometimes a lot of shopping around and trying a
Mm,
bunch of different physical activities
yeah.
before you can find one that you actually enjoy, especially for novice exercisers. Uh, and in fact, there's even some brain imaging research that's been done in Turku that shows that advanced exercisers and novice exercisers or never exercisers actually differ in their brain responses to doing physical activity. So the reward pathways are different for different people, and our past experience has led us to either enjoy or
Mm,
despise
yeah.
these physical activities. So those things are there, um, and in trying to find a physical activity that's right for a novice exerciser, uh, you have to focus not only on the fact that the person wants to be physically active, but what do they want to achieve from being physically active?
Mm,
Is it that they want to feel better about themselves, or is it that they want to reduce their blood pressure, or is it that they want to lose weight, or is it that they want to spend time with other people? You need to tap into the other goals within this person's life that they could be trying to achieve through physical activity. So often people start a new physical activity routine or a diet because a doctor has told them, hey, you need to do something to look after your health. You're getting older, you're starting to have risks for chronic disease, you need to try to do something about it. And that's not a, I mean, while it's a motivator to get people to think about the change, they need to think about it in terms of their goal structures and who they are. And if you can
mm,
find something that may not tap into that health aspect, an activity that they don't associate with health necessarily, but they do associate with having fun with their friends, or that they associate with, going to a nice environment, like, going out in the woods or something, that looking at other benefits other than just health or just the one that the doctor had recommended is really important.
mm,
And that's a really tough trade-off sometimes, especially in like medical settings where you have, medical experts, physiology experts who say this person has this chronic disease and they need to do this exercise to
mhm,
achieve this
yeah.
physiological benefit. And when the person they're talking about looks at this exercise, they say, that's not for me. I'm not going to be doing that. So you
Mm,
have to try to find a compromise between what the person might actually be able to do, be willing to do, and that could help achieve at least some of the physiological improvement that is sought. So it can't be all of one or all of the other. There needs to be some sort of a compromise there to find the best way forward for an individual.
Mm. Yeah. I can resonate that also in individual level. So if I would go to a doctor or to a person who would like to make me as healthy as possible, perhaps they would prescribe me artistic gymnastics because I could do some musical expression, and that's good for my brain, and then my mobility would develop nicely. I could be more flexible. That could be beneficial for my health, and I could be training my strength. But I don't identify with that culture. So and I think this is the good news, that there's so many ways to skin the cat, and you can go shopping and you can look at try different things and what works for you, and then you can look at different goals, not only because a lot of people cannot find the intrinsic joy satisfaction from that exercise itself, but they can couple it perhaps with some other things, like if they really like nature, like you said there, or they like water as an element, or they like a certain friend who is doing, like, let's say, whatever Eastern dance, and you try it with that friend because you like that friend and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah,
try it for that
exactly.
reason. So you can try to find what is, again, we go back to reward and who you are, and your values, that how is this valuable for me. And like I said, like for me, artistic gymnastics, there's only
Mhm.
the instrumental value, and if you have only instrumental value, I don't know if it's going to be sustainable.
Yeah, good point. And the well, it's all value is instrumental.
Mm,
I would argue, and being a strong behaviorist as I am, I would always say that there's some sort of a value. We don't necessarily think about that value, and we might not be able to accurately place what that value is, but it's there.
mm,
Um, this conversation made me think about this piece of an intervention that I developed when I was working in Newcastle in the UK. We had developed a physical activity promotion pathway that was a follow on to the NHS health checks program. So in the health checks program, people go in for a whole cardiovascular disease and diabetes risk factor workup, and often they get some sort of physical activity advice after that, but that's not enough to change behavior. So
yeah,
in
yeah.
speaking to doctors and nurses and people who do these follow-on visits, we developed a tailor-made like program for them to use to help these patients then start changing their physical activity behavior. And one portion of that was a website, and one feature we had on the website was a little quiz, which is based on the exercise motivations inventory. And the exercise motivations inventory is basically a questionnaire you can fill out, which tells you basically the reasons that are most important for you for why you are physically active, or for why you would become physically active or might become physically active. And we gave people this questionnaire and showed them their results and said, okay, for you, these are the most important reasons for you possibly being physically active. So one was like for appearance, or avoiding ill health, or maintaining flexibility, or improving strength, or social reasons, or for recognition. There's a whole, I don't know, 20 or so different domains in this exercise motivations inventory. And for each one that came up on the person's list, we had devised or come up with a list of 5 or 6 different types of physical activity that would suit well to
Mm,
people who had that type of motivation.
okay.
So um, that was a fun little tool, and I think that if you talk to people about what they want to get out of physical activity, most people will be able to tell you something.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's a was fun, that little
mm,
tool, and I think it has
nice.
some utility still.
Can you have some examples of that? So give me an individual who has certain type of motivation, and then what are the proposed physical activity modalities for that person?
Yeah, so the one was about like adventure or something like this. So we
Mm,
proposed things like parasailing, I think, was one of them. I can't remember exactly. It was probably 10 years ago when I developed that thing. But
Yeah.
for the strength, obviously that was just doing some different types of strength training. Then there was nimbleness was one, so there were some like agility exercises that we'd put in there, and different types of team sports. Like I think badminton was one for the agility. Um, yeah, there was a huge list. I can't remember them now, but I can send that to you if you're interested.
Okay, please do. And there is actually in Finnish same or similar tool which is called liikkujatyyppi
Yeah,
test. I'm not sure if that's also in English, but at least like when you said this adventure, and I did that test, and I'm an adventure type. That's my personality. I like new things. I like to explore, and I love mountain biking for that reason because you just go crazy, and I like the speed as well, and you can explore new territories and find like faster new places than just walking. So and it makes sense for me that, and we quite a lot today already spoke about that identity, and when you can find exercise which fits your identity. But if you just look at yourself from today's perspective, uh, I think it's not the best way. And we talked about this earlier, that you need to have a little bit discrepancy. You want to be a little bit forward looking, because you can be more. As a coach, I'm always thinking about this, that I think I can be a little bit more, not like I don't have to take like huge steps, but I can be a bit better on something. Equally, I think everybody can find a bit more from themselves, and I see that gives a huge value for all of us. That when you can, discover a little bit new thing from
mm,
yourself. If you always just do the same thing, I think that's eventually gonna, you know, decrease your ability to see the life and enjoy life at the fullest, I think.
that's possible. I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Though,
Mm,
if you're still, feeling good and doing the same
yeah,
things, then I think that's okay too.
yeah, yeah. So, and
So
what
for
I
me,
like to,
like I
yeah.
play football and I play basketball, and if I'm doing those things, I'm happy. that's
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. And people are different also. That I'm a particularly geared towards learning, developing. So that's not every people. So some
Mm,
people, yeah, I fancy other things, and I think at the same time you can have satisfaction and ambition. So it's
sure.
not, they are not mutually exclusive. So, and I think
Definitely not.
actually believe that to really develop yourself, satisfaction is quite important to find. And if you
Mm,
don't find satisfaction, then it can be quite draining force if you
sure.
constantly try to develop yourself and never find satisfaction. So,
Absolutely. And I think that's also relevant from beginner exercisers too. That being satisfied with I can do, even if it's
mm,
just this, I can do that, and that's okay for me for now. Maybe they still want to be here, but being satisfied with what you're able to do at the moment is super important.
yeah, cool. Anything else about what really works on keeping the
On
New
the New
Year's
Year's
resolution?
resolutions, no,
Yeah.
not that's the main ones, I think.
Mm, mm. Okay, like what do you think also about? And I mentioned again this Spreckley and colleagues article. So one key thing was enduring challenges, and I guess you also mentioned about that one. So when you do this self monitoring, you actually get more realistic about your behaviors, especially when it's physical activity, and you see the progress also there, and you get more like when you experience challenge, you perhaps um, easier can get back on the horse compared to that situation where you are not aware of your behaviors, and you perhaps have uh, like overly high expectations of what you have done and what you should be doing. So that could be one. But any thoughts on this like ability to endure challenges? And I give you a bit more context. So in this research, they said that those people who already mentally prepared for obstacles. So understanding that there can be sometimes 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, they gain weight, but they believe that, you know, this is part of the business. This is part of the journey. My kids have been sick for 2 weeks and it's been stressful, and I will get back next week. And then, you know, then they got back, and then they, you know, appreciate it. They went a few steps back, but then they actually take 3 steps forward in the long run. So what do you think about this challenge mindset for
Yeah, well, it's very
sustainable
important,
behavior?
and
Yeah.
and as you said, problems will occur anytime
Yeah.
you're trying something new, or especially when working toward weight loss. There will be hiccups, there will be bumps in the road, and knowing that those will happen and being realistic that they will happen is important from the get go. Because if you know that they're going to happen, then it's easier when they do happen for you to view it as a learning experience and a normal part of the journey,
Yeah.
rather than something that tells you to turn around and go home.
Mm.
And this is yeah, really important point. Like, not viewing setbacks as failures, but rather
Mm.
as learning opportunities and ways to improve, and think about the future in light of what might get in the way.
Nice. And I'm tempted to think this way, that if you do this exercise, which you proposed earlier, that you actually uh, kind of really reflect on your what you can do, and let's say you have had like good streak of 8 weeks of doing some behavior and progressing, and yes, I can do this, I can do that. So when you face that obstacle, you can get back to those experiences. You have quite strong experience and
Mm.
emotional memory that, yeah, I could do that, and perhaps you are not so disheartened if you have really kind of reminded yourself throughout the journey that I can do this, I can do that, rather than focusing too much on what you can't do.
Yeah, and along with that, I think that, you know, preparing for setbacks, not only acknowledging that they will happen, but thinking about what those specific setbacks might
Mm,
be and how
yeah.
you're going to react when they occur. That's just a pretty basic coping planning strategy, we call it. So, how do you cope with failures, and that you have a plan that you can put in place when a failure or a setback occurs, is really important.
Mm,
Um, and
yeah.
you can brainstorm and think about things that could go wrong, but then in the process, further things could go wrong. So it's important then to also keep track of those. What got in the
Mm,
way? I had a plan that I was going to go on Tuesday and Thursday to the gym, but I
yeah.
didn't go.
Mhm.
Tuesday I went, Thursday I didn't go. Why didn't I go on Thursday?
Mm,
I fell asleep. Okay. How can I overcome that the next time? Oh, maybe I go on Friday or go on Saturday to make up for it. Something like this.
yeah. Yeah. Have you sometimes done with people then, when you map these obstacles and setbacks, have you actually proposed to identify the habit which could then come into the way of the new habit, which you said in the beginning that this is a common challenge that people face, that the old habit will overcome the new habit? So is that useful, that you actually map out, this is likely to be my 1 or 2 habits which will really compete heavily with these new habits?
Mhm. Yeah, this is a process called habit reversal or behavioral substitution. There are two specific techniques related to this. So, yeah, knowing about the dominant behavioral pattern and what you're typically doing in a
Mm,
situation where you're trying to put the new behavior is basically the problem in this problem solving or coping planning thing. That
mm,
I might just want to sit on the couch instead of going for the run. Okay, what are you going to do then?
mm,
Stand up and yeah, whatever. Stand up and do 2 jumping jacks, and then say, okay, now let's go. Um, any, yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion, to just think about the old behavior as a possible barrier to the new behavior and plan
mm.
accordingly.
Yeah, yeah, I see. And and sometimes I see that when like there can be over focus on the negative stuff, and we started with sort of negative stuff, and what's your advice on that, so that your mindset is enough optimistic, enough positive? Challenges will occur, but how can you maintain enough positive attitude?
in spite of setbacks, or
Yeah, yeah,
you mean?
exactly.
Well, I think just being prepared for it, and having an emotional coping response ready, like when the setback occurs, thinking, okay, if I don't do what I'd planned to do, instead of feeling bad, I will, just walk to the end of the block and back, and think about how I can do better next time, or think about how good it feels to do something, even when I've had a setback. Just really, really basic things. I don't think that there's too much more apart from this attention control and having a way to to tell yourself that you will stay positive and not view it as the end of the world, that it's okay to make
Mm,
mistakes. It's
yeah, that's
okay.
good. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's okay. It's part of the plan. We are all in
Yeah.
this life
Mm.
together, and yeah, it's. I like this saying that sometimes it feels like world is a soup and I'm a fork, and I think this is this is something that happens to all of us, especially when you have a toddler at home as you do. So,
Yep.
it's not the right time and place to put up some really mighty New Year's resolutions. Or what's your own approach? Let's ask this one. That what's your own approach? Do you do New Year's resolutions
No.
yourself?
I don't know. I have in the past, but so I used to smoke. I stopped smoking as a New Year's resolution one year, so that was good.
Mm,
But nah, not anymore usually. Because if I want to set a goal, I can do it any day of the year. I don't need it to be a specific day. However,
yeah.
with that said, I take that back. This year, I did say that I'm going to stop using Google Calendar and start using Outlook Calendar. So that is my my New Year's
Mm,
resolution. And yeah, have I got a plan for it? Not yet, but there's still
mm.
13 days. I'll figure something out.
Yep. 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 Okay. Cool. Cool. Okay. So shall we talk about few words about this within person research and how that is perhaps useful when you, yeah, do actually research on behavior change?
Yeah, no problem. Um, so a lot of what we quote unquote know about behavioral change and about what works to change behavior is based on randomized controlled trials of a whole package of intervention content. So you might have like some motivational interview at the beginning, and some behavioral experiment for them to try out new behaviors, and maybe some coaching on how they can start the new behaviors and set goals and make plans and track what they're doing. And then maybe some interventions use some sort of uh, positive emotion
Mm,
regulation, like focusing on the positives that happen. Some of the techniques we talked about earlier. But so many of these randomized controlled trials have two groups: one that receives all this content and one that receives nothing, or just some information, something very minimal. And they get both groups to fill in some baseline surveys or take some physical activity measurements, and then they deliver the intervention to one group and nothing to the other group, and then they measure those same things again 3, 6, however many months later, 1 month later, three months later, doesn't matter. And then they compare the two groups and see which one improved their physical activity more. No surprise, it's very commonly the one that received the intervention.
mm,
But Uh, on the whole, these interventions have quite small effects on changing behavior, at least when you look at the group level.
mm,
Now, within that group, there are probably some people who really responded well, some people who maybe responded a little, and some people who didn't really respond.
mm,
But not everybody, achieves the great heights. Now, what's always been the most interesting facet of this type of research to me is, what is it that makes one person respond well to this intervention, another person respond much less well? And importantly, how do they change over time within that? Is it that they're at this baseline level and then they suddenly jump? Or is it a long and slow gradual jump? Or are there actually a lot of fluctuations in their behavior over time? And by taking a snapshot of somebody's behavior here and then 3 months later, you miss any possibility to detect what's going on under the surface.
Mm.
And especially when you have a multi-component intervention where maybe in the first week people come for the motivational interview, and then a few weeks later they come for a coaching session, and then a few weeks later they come for a coaching session. And even if the person does change from baseline to the end of the study, when did they change? Did they change after that initial motivational interview and then we can throw the rest of the intervention out?
Mm. Yep.
Or did they change after the subsequent components, or how does it all work? So when you just have these snapshots, you don't get a full sense of what's going on. And I don't know how deep you want me to go in talking about
Mm.
this, because I can go pretty deep if you want.
Yeah, I mean, would be nice to hear some practical examples and context that like people are different, and you want to find the, like you also mentioned earlier that you have this tool where you can actually find physical activity interventions to fit the exact motivation of that individual.
Mhm.
So would be nice to hear more context on that, that what kind of types of people you have
Gotcha.
identified, and what then works for these exact types of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a health psychologist or behavioral scientist, when we're thinking about how to intervene to change behavior, we first try to identify what it is that's driving that behavior. So there are a lot of psychological theories that put forth things like intention, so I intend to be physically active, self-efficacy, how much you think you can, are you capable of being physically active, your attitude toward physical activity, what those others that are similar to yourself, how you view them in relation to physical activity. Is it normal to be
Mm.
physically active? What do other people around you want you to do? What do your family want you to do? What your friends want you to do in relation to physical activity? These are all what we call predictors of behavior, or determinants of behavior.
Yep.
And when we um, try to develop an intervention that targets these determinants, we might give a survey to a group of people and use these group level associations between these variables and behavior to identify, okay, this one has a really strong relationship with behavior at the group level, or this one has even stronger relationships. But that only works at the group level.
Mm.
There's just because it works at the group level doesn't mean that the same person is always driven the same way as the group is. That just because self-efficacy is important at group level, there may be and likely are individuals for whom it doesn't matter if self-efficacy is there or not. They can still do the behavior.
Mm.
Um, so so then when we think back to this research study and we've developed this intervention, we have some sort of a theory in mind. We try to create motivation, we try to create self-efficacy in the interventions. But if that intervention doesn't fit one of the people, we can't expect that they would respond. If we're targeting determinants within a person that are not important determinants for that person,
Mm.
how could they possibly benefit?
Yep.
Um, so some of the recent work that we've done, we took a large school-based physical activity promotion intervention called Let's Move It, which was delivered here in Finland. And when analyzed at group level, the sort of change from baseline to post-treatment in the between the intervention and control group, it had minimal effects, like almost no effects, and non-significant. And when we controlled for how well people, the individuals in the study, matched with the theory behind the intervention, so the different determinants that were being targeted by the intervention, and when we controlled for that, then we actually found effects of the intervention, significant effects that were
Mm.
of a larger magnitude. And I think this goes back to what I said earlier about how our interventions as a whole show only small effects. When we control for how well the interventions we're delivering actually match to the individuals, then I think we can show larger effects. And this creates
Yeah.
the sort of future of the field, in my view, which is sort of a
Yeah.
personalized medicine, if you will,
Mm.
of behavior change. If you can identify for one person through a series of like a longitudinal data set of that same person over time, you can see what factors are most associated for that person with behavior. What are the locations they're in? Who are the people they are around? What are the different psychological factors at that given moment? And which of those are more likely to lead to behavior or not? If you can identify a theory for that person, this person has deficits in this and this, both of which are highly linked to physical activity, and target your intervention delivery to the needs of that person, I think you're likely to have greater effects. And with now mobile phone based interventions becoming much more possible and common than they were 10, 15 years ago, we're really stepping up what can be done to change behavior at the individual level.
Mm. That's fantastic. So we have the determinants of behavior, like you mentioned, things like intention, attitude, motivation, self-efficacy, let's say social evaluation, um, and an individual might have deficit in one or more of these. And when you match the intervention based on the deficit, then you get more impact of the intervention, right? Did I
That's
understood?
right. You'd expect so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so how can the listener then use this information? Is there like a survey out there which one could do, or ask some questions from oneself to understand what's my deficit for these determinants of behavior, so that they can then think about, wow, this is specific. I need to target self-efficacy, and this is the way I do it. And so is there a way one can do this?
Well, this is the core of um, psychology, and of like the origins of psychology is just talking to people and asking about, okay, you have this behavior that you want to do. When are the chances that you could possibly do it? How are you thinking about this behavior? What is getting in your way? And helping to come up with strategies to get over the specific barriers for this person. And if they're not motivated to do it, if they don't have an intention to, what can you do? How can you talk to the person to help them to form an intention? And motivational
Mm,
interviewing, as you mentioned earlier, is a good, or well, quite effective way of getting people to form these intentions to change. So
yeah.
there's there's no real uh, disconnect between like traditional ways of analyzing what is predicting a behavior or what
Mm,
influences a behavior, and then
yep.
trying to intervene on it in a psychology like a CBT type intervention than there is in what I'm describing. The only difference is when you have a psychologist speak to an individual for 45 minutes to try to analyze what's going on, and you have tens of thousands of people who could benefit from health behavior change, there's not enough money at all in the system to make these sort of changes happen. Sure,
Mm,
for the fortunate
yep.
few, there are resources available for such individual approaches to behavior change, and the time necessary to invest in those things. But when talking about the population level, there just aren't the resources for it. Public health systems are
Yep.
already stretched, and
Yep.
non-communicable diseases are a big reason for that stretch. So it makes sense to try to find ways to use technology to do the things that would previously have been done in a face-to-face setting with now on a smartphone. And when our AI capabilities are increasing week on week, it seems there's some new breakthrough in what's possible.
Mm,
We're really not far away from having chatbots that can have a conversation with a person and, you know, identify what's going on and what's driving that person's behavior,
Yep. Yep.
and then guide guide toward behavioral change.
Mm. Yeah, I could even try chat GPT that how well that could answer my if I'm kind of laying out what I'm interested about and what my goals are, and how well chat GPT could perhaps provide some assistance on that
Yeah,
one. So that
Chat
could be,
GPT is not so good yet at
yeah.
asking the right questions or at really
Yeah.
investigating what's going on. GPT
Yeah.
4 is a little bit better,
Hmm.
but
Okay.
there's much more much more on the horizon,
Mm.
much more.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's cool because what you said in the beginning, that focusing your attention to the behavior is one key. And even talking with chat GPT, or if you have the GPT-4, it's even better. You can for sure like find something more to focus on,
Hmm.
and like what you said earlier also, like just talking to somebody, just talking to somebody is great. And of course that's best if there's a professional who can perhaps motivational interview style talk to you. But common sense and good old goodwill, and just be nice to the other person and ask questions and listen,
Mm.
and you can help a lot the other person then to realize
Yeah,
like what's their intention, what's their self-efficacy, what's their attitude, how's the social side, motivation, all of these things. So in a way it's common sense, and I guess like, and I know there's research as well to show that peer coaching can be an effective way to facilitate behavior change. So it doesn't always have to be the healthcare provider, a coach,
yeah,
but just somebody to talk to, so you can find more granularity to where you focus your attention to.
sure.
Yep. Okay. Nice. But I really like that what you said, that this is the future, that match the intervention really to the individual, and it's the right way, I believe. And this is why a lot of people are averse towards the traditional healthcare, because it's too much of a one size fits all package, and here's the optimal intervention, just do it.
Mm.
And people are naturally a bit averse because it's not matching their complex profile, if you will.
Yeah, and it's hard to do. It's really difficult to do, and it's maybe, well, it's sometimes difficult to think that we could develop technology that could actually do that as well as a human can with
Yeah.
enough time. But I'm optimistic of the possibility,
Hmm.
at least from trying to analyze what's going on,
Yeah.
um, getting some personal level predictive models of behavior is much better than group level predictive models. I think it lets us know more of what's going on and helps us try to identify different types of people, for example, that who will respond and who won't, and who needs what and when.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Hey, has been really good to talk to you. I think let's start to wrap up, and I'd just like to ask from you that, what's the final advice from you to people who want to commit to a goal, whether it's now in the New Year's and you have New Year's resolution, or you have a commitment and you want to do something. So, what are the final couple points and tips that you encourage people to do?
Yeah. Um, well, as I said before, track what you're doing, but that's not
Yep.
the main one. I think focus on what you can do and what you're getting out of it. Any sort of fun or interest you can get in a new behavior is going to be good for maintaining it in the long term. Even if it's that little bitty bit, hang on to that. Grab those rewards. When you experience something positive when trying a new behavior, hold on to that feeling and use it.
Mm.
Think about it, how it felt. You were there, you did the new behavior that you've been trying to do and that you've been putting your effort toward, and you got that little bit of reward. How did it feel? Remind yourself of that, and use it as a little fire burning behind you to keep you going.
Mm. Nice, nice. Okay, that's a good way to end. Thank you, Keegan. I think lots of useful insights for me, and hopefully, I'm sure actually to the audience as well. So, thank
Great.
you, and happy New Year's to you,
Thanks, Heikki.
Keegan. All
Same to
right,
you.
see you later. Thanks.